might say they may transform the economy, don't expect any major differences. You may not be able to see the transformation. One would be happy if they make it more efficient. Both political parties believe in tourism, and they believe the tourist industry is the area they're targeting to develop this country. And agriculture will always be a minor. We must do more in agriculture and make it more effective. But the biggest challenge we have in agriculture today is marketing. To market, to get real for a market. One of the issues you may see changing is the tax policies. I am particularly concerned about the tax threshold. Because you see, all my life, I have lived, and most of my relatives, families, and community people have lived in Grenada in terms of the economic situation in the group that falls under the lower socioeconomic strata. Government have a tax threshold of $3,000 a month. If you're not making $3,000 a month, you're not paying more tax than a vagrant. You're not paying more tax than a mentally challenged. And you're not paying more tax than an unemployed person. That is very significant. And that is important. Because if the government changes the tax threshold, and nothing is wrong with that, that is where I would not like that. Because although I am not in that strata, most of my relatives and families in that area. So it means less income going to come to the people in the lower economic bracket. And that is significant. For many years, although you hear people talking and making a lot of noise about tax, they were not paying any additional tax more than the indirect tax they pay. But if you drop the tax threshold, then you will have more people in the bracket. It's a different economic policies. Nothing is wrong with it. Depends on whether you're paying or not. If you're not paying it, less income will come to you. So governments, all governments, they want people to graduate from this tax threshold so they could pay tax. Because government want all the citizens to pay tax. But if you're in a lower income bracket, it could put a burden on you if you also have to pay personal income tax. So some policies of government want to make certain that the people in the lower income group have enough disposable income so their dignity will be intact. Their social status would be decent. You would not be able to discern a rich child from a poor child. Watching children go to school, you will not be able to discern which parent is working for a good salary. As it is now, it is not easy to discern. Because although government have a tax threshold of $3,000 a month, Grenada also have high social safety net program to protect the people in the lower echelons of society. In other words, the poorer people, the people who work in agriculture, on the estates, people in Imani, people who leave their job and they're not getting a decent pension from NIS. So that is very important for us to understand. More often than not, when a government change, people expect big fundamental changes. Well, if both governments have the same policy, you will not find any fundamental changes in government. What you will find And don't expect any massive transfer in a changing of workers. Workers in the public service is well protected by the Public Service Commission and the trade unions. The trade unions are very strong. And while they might wink at one or two discomfort of public officers, they would defend public officers. Otherwise, they would lose their posts. They will be voted out of the union executive. So don't expect any massive or big transferring and changing of people in the public service. I say that because listening to, participating and following some of the czars on social media, some of the things they want, they cannot get it. A public officer could be transferred from one position to another, but of equal status. And he would not lose his pay if he is transferred. So if you're a permanent secretary, you could only be transferred to the posts of permanent secretary. If you're an extension officer, you could be transferred to the equivalent post, whether you're in G or A or B or C or D. So in sense, you cannot be victimized because you're transferred. You might feel uncomfortable. I have always encouraged people who work with employers to grow where they plant you. Because you are transferred, it doesn't mean you are victimized. Because you are transferred to a post of equal status and equal pay. So you are not victimized. You need to grow where they plant you. We have too much of workers in the public service that like to cry wolf, particularly when they are supported by oppositions. This must discontinue. So there is not much maneuvering for one government from the other in an election. And sometimes this disappoints quite a lot individuals who are politicos or maybe political warriors on this social net program that continue to spew venom and bitterness and sometimes hate. And they need to understand, when a political party war in the wilderness for a very long time, when they're in opposition for a very long time, sometimes when they win election, they just forget they're in government. And some of the political activists, some of the political warriors, who may be extremely influential, continue to behave as if they're in opposition. So they're looking for blood, they're looking for head, they're looking for somebody to be fired. They're looking for massive changes. And sometimes your political party don't have the guts to tell you there is no massive change coming. Caller, welcome.
Hey, good morning.
Yes, my brother.
Well, actually, it's afternoon. In morning and night side afternoon where you are. Listen, I just want to make a short comment.
Yes, my
and
brother.
let Grenadians know that even if we had a change of government, there's not going to be any much significant changes to the economy unless that government find a large source of income somewhere that can boost the economy. But based on what I'm seeing here, they are going to be doing the same thing that the NNP are doing, depend on tourism and all the little agriculture and stuff that we can export. That's what they're going to be dependent on, unless they decide to raise the taxes. So that's the only way they can have more income coming in. But the poor people is the ones that are going to be suffering if they do that. But I cannot see any changes unless they start drilling for oil and they found oil or something. That's my 2 cents, man. Thank you.
Yes, my brother. I think it's so important for some people to tell the political warriors, the czars, the people who have been in opposition so long and they want to see fundamental changes. There is none coming. You could say you want to transform the economy. You're going to transform it from tourism. You're going to strengthen agriculture. You could make it more efficient and smooth and motivate people to change their mentality and their attitude. But sometimes people get disappointed and shocked because they don't see the government making the changes that they promise. And it's difficult for the government now to say, don't expect massive or fundamental changes. So that's where I believe people who are not openly flaunting a political party in Grenada could give you the facts. There's people in the public service you would like to see them fired. The government cannot fire them. They're not working with the politician. The politician cannot even give some members of the public service instruction. The permanent secretary is an insulator. Part of their responsibility is to be as an insulator between the politician and the public officers. That is why I believe politicians must have confidence in the permanent secretaries. It's difficult. It is difficult for a politician if they don't have confidence in a permanent secretary. And normally if the politician don't have confidence in the permanent secretary, they go to the prime minister and ask to change the permanent secretary. And then the prime minister has to switch around a permanent secretary. This is so important. Why these people at that level must walk the straight and narrow. They must learn to be career public officers and don't openly flaunt any political party. Because the politician cannot fire the public officer. They cannot. They cannot even give the public officer instruction. They have a chain of command. The public officer cannot go to the politician in an official capacity. They have a chain of command. You can't even go to the PS. If you are a junior officer, you have to pass through your boss. So I think it's important because I continue to see some of the political warriors on social media asking for things they would not see happen. You cannot see it happen. It would not happen. Public officers are well protected. Particularly if you're in a pensionable post, if you are appointed by the Public Service Commission, and you also have the voice of the union protecting you. And normally opposition does join and strengthen that voice. So the call I've been seeing on social media, it'd be difficult for the politicians to tell you that. They might have promised you that, but they can't give you that. So you have to give them a break and understand you can do that. What must be of concern for all of us is the people in the lower socio-economic strata. The people we like to call poor people, vulnerable, handout, greedy and needy. These people must be protected. If you drop the tax threshold, they are the ones who will be affected most. You see, in our history, remember during the period of Mr. Blaze, Mr. Blaze had a structural adjustment program. And two of the fundamental aspects of it was to retrench workers and cut social program. That structural adjustment program that involved retrenchment backfired in that the lawyers gave him bad advice. After he retrenched workers, he had to pay them. I believe he's under 84. Well, I'm not certain. He had to pay them as if they reached the age of 60. The unions went to the lawyer, and the union's lawyers advised the union that they cannot do nothing. And I think it was Derek Knights that took the case and win the case. And then Mr. Blaze had to pay people that he retrenched, that was 23 years old, as if they reached the age of 60. And then some people regretted that it was not retrenched. Then under Mr. George Brizan had another structural adjustment program. He called it homegrown. He retrenched the workers in the agriculture sector. And George Brizan is practically a czar where agriculture is concerned. People in Grenada believe he was the best, one of the best agriculture ministers. I have a different view because of my philosophy. I think he was one of the worst. Because he retrenched the agriculture workers. He did not retrench workers from the public service because he feared the union. But he cut social program and he retrenched agricultural workers. The same man that cut down Belvedere nutmeg. The first place nutmeg was planted in Grenada to plant banana that should not be planted in that high belt because of leaf spot. So you see, we've been around a long time. And when I hear people expressing some of the expectations, only political shock is going to take you. So I thought it important to provoke discussion in that area. Don't expect massive transformation. Agriculture, we'll be making noise about agriculture the same way. A few days ago, the people who was exporting soursop in Grenada, some of them was left in tears because the flight had to be cancelled because of the inclement weather. And they already harvested the soursop, pay the farmers, and they have to absorb the loss. I think this is about the third time for the year they have received these massive losses. One of the biggest challenges we have is market. And irrespective of all the transformation you're hearing from agricultural, local exports, you're not hearing anything about what they're going to do for marketing. And because of our small number of people in Grenada, 110, 100,000 people, economy of scale, it is easy to flood the market. Always remember a paper George Brizan wrote. Then I thought it was fantastic. He said if every Grenadian eat 1 pound of cabbage a week, he calculated that to be 20,000 pounds of cabbage a week. Because at that time we had 20,000 households. But after he became a minister of agriculture, he didn't bother with cabbage. He cut down nutmeg that take 10, 12, 15 years to mature, to plant banana that takes 6 to 9 months to mature. So we need, sometimes I wonder, where are our exports? We have so much Grenadians with a briefcase, a certificate. And I know these men are well educated, but they seem to lack the ability to practicalize their certification. So I believe we must provoke discussion and encourage think tanks in the country. And the political directorates could benefit significantly from think tanks. I have not paid any heed. I have not paid any heed to manifestos. The fact that manifestos came out so late is because the political parties don't expect to do nothing different from what the previous government is doing. The NDC is not prepared to do anything different, anything fundamentally different. And the NNP was going on the same trajectory. That is why manifestos is a joke. It is something that is written by good writers. And a very general in statement. So when you finish read it, you cannot pin down the government to anything specific. If you could, then read it and let us discuss the issue. Let us provoke discussion. Whether it is in your home or in the community or in the rum shop. Let us talk about issues and see if we can come up with answers. But we cannot get away from the fact. We cannot get away from the fact that the tax threshold in Grenada must be a significant factor. And what you could do is to do some research and look at the tax threshold. Look at the tax threshold in St. Vincent, Dominica, St. Lucia, Barbados. Look at the tax threshold. You see my brother saying here that please check the phone lines. He doesn't think the line is working. Next brother saying they have certificates, but they are not well rounded. They only know what they were taught. I think they need to discuss the issue. I've always been challenging our intelligentsia to try to practicalize your certification. When you go to university, you learn quite a lot of principles and facts and content. But this thing could only be effective if you do some implementation, if you practicalize it. And this is so important for our country because education is the answer. So as you get your certificates, it must work for us. You must practicalize it. You know? Take for instance the United States of America. They have the world's most well-oiled army. But even within the army, they have certain special branches, like the Rangers and other special Marines. So the same way in Grenada, all of us is there. But our people who get tertiary educated must be, or ought to be, or should be in the forefront of our development. So how they could do that if when you get that level of discipline, you refuse to hold any discussion or you refuse to practicalize it? And I believe that is a challenge we have. So we say a lot of things about those who are doing, but later on it is difficult for us to do anything. And this is why my biggest concern is the tax threshold in Grenada. And I encourage you, find out what is the tax threshold. We have a caller on the line? Yes, caller, welcome.
Yeah, yeah. Good evening, Mr.
Yes, my brother, welcome.
Yeah. I do believe when some people get it, they went to study and they get a degree, and they're from that village. When they come back, they big and mighty. You know, they turn their back on the village where they're from, but right, and they're gonna live somewhere among the rich people. What you find happening is people that they could help in the village, right? They see them as nobody. What I will say to them, that we never forget where we came from, where we are right now. And when you reach up the ladder, you must always try to help those at the bottom, because you are the top. You will not be the forever. And I always tell them one day to come, you will come back down. And want to come associate yourself with people. So never forget where you came from. Always good to remember you was there and someone helped you. And when you remember someone helped you, you will always be willing to help others. But when you forget that you was the position just as those at the bottom, and someone helped you to reach where you are, you always remember that. Remember where you came from. When you remember where you came from, you always will want to help others to reach up the ladder. I want to reach up the ladder and spread and just continue to spread the development and helping educate the people of American computer madness. It will be better. People will be working for a higher salary because the education expand and they will help others. And one day I was in Pierre, like in the school, people send 40 students to do an exam and 40 students pass. You know how proud that school would be? And if you like to send you some poor children from your village to do something and all be successful, you know how proud that village will be? So I do believe what happens is people that could help those that need help, reach out and help them. When they reach out and help them, some days to come, they will always speak good about you. So Mr. P, have a blessing.
Yes, thank you, Colin. It's a very important thing. You say if you spend 40 and 10 pass, that's good, 25%. But if you spend 40 and 4 pass, that's a serious challenge in this country. And we want people to, I always encourage people in my program, do not believe all what you hear on social media. A lot of disfiguring of the truth is taking place on social media. Propaganda. And sometimes they mix up all the truth. They take truths, they put it in a bucket, they shake it up, and then they quote it. But it's also important for us to do little research. We have no intention of going and do a university paper. When I say research, you aren't trying to write article on the newspaper. It's just for your own conviction. So for instance, you could simply ask an economist or a politician, what is the tax threshold in St. Vincent? That's not hard. Ask a politician, what is the tax threshold in St. Vincent and Dominica? How does the tax threshold in Grenada relates to that of St. Vincent? People like to say in Grenada, we're paying the most tax. And then when you ask a question, they cannot answer. In Grenada, if you're not making $3,000 a month, you're not paying more tax than a vagrant. So please find out. Don't believe me when I speak, always do a little research. Right in the community, you can ask. There are some people who could pick up the telephone and get the information from you. Others have idea of the information. The tax threshold in Grenada is designed to protect the people in the lower socio-economic grouping. In addition to that, you have a very strong safety net program. The Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Social Studies, Social Affairs say, and I've been quoting them for over the last 5 years, that there is no child in Grenada that can claim they cannot go to school because they don't have the minimum requirements. A lot of countries in the Caribbean cannot say that. And we must know that. Sometimes we must concern with what affects us most. Because if your relatives' economic situation deteriorate, you are the first one they're going to come to for assistance. The one that used to give you a beer in the shop, now you want money to buy sugar. So it is very important in Grenada's context to protect the people in the lower economic bracket. And I say that is significant because Grenada have a strange class system. Some people poor, but they think they're rich. Some people believe because they come from university and they have certification, it puts them in a new social class. Strange. Derek Walcott wrote about it. Unlike Jamaica, when you reach in Jamaica, one time you know who rich and who poor. In Grenada, you have people living in the same house and one believe in a different social class because of his academic achievement. So we have to be very careful. The two structural adjustment programs that we had in the past, under Mr. Blaze and under Judge Brizan, created more social problems for this country. The structural adjustment program we had, the last one, under Kit Mitchell, soon after the IMF come out in Greece, it did not result in retrenchment and it did not result in a cut in social program. Instead, social spending in Grenada was increased. And that's one of the reasons a lot of people talk about handout. This is one of the reasons a lot of people in Grenada believe that some people were given things. Strong social safety netting program. I support it. I believe it is good. But if you always had toilet facilities in your home and you're born with that, you wouldn't understand the importance of somebody in the 70 years for the first time getting toilet facilities in their house. So they don't have to go under the cocoa. They don't have to go in the bush anymore. From the bedroom, they could go in the toilet. And whether 1, 2, or 3 in the morning, they could go and bathe. This is so significant that if you always had that, you would never realize the importance of it. And I would not like to see these things disturbed. And it's very easy to disturb. Because if you drop the tax threshold, or if you cut social programs, then automatically you're going to see the change in the community when the women have no jobs. And when some of the men, they have less income and they tend to bargain harder and they lobby more. You have more social problems. Then you will be able to discern which parents have the discretionary income on the ground. It is difficult for some people to see that because they don't identify with developmental groups in the community. You don't see them. Whether it's Poetry Salaka, whether it's Telescope Food Fest, whether it's Career Bashalaka, whether it's River Sally, or whether it's developmental groups in Pause or other communities. Akumande, you don't see some of our brightest sons and daughters, they don't get involved with it. So they will not understand the cries of the poor. Normally the politicians, over time, they understand it. And that's why there was such strong lobby to strengthen social safety net program. We have a caller on the line? We don't have a caller. The line good? Right. Somebody saying the main line seems to be giving trouble. Okay. But you can use the number called via WhatsApp. So we could try the number via WhatsApp. The main line seems to be giving some problems, but the line through WhatsApp, I think, is available, so you can speak it. And another quote from Facebook, I think gas and foodstuff will go down, and I will get my pension. Well, that is great. Gas and foodstuff will go down. Well, I don't think gas could go down much further, caller. Because in all fairness, remember, we have this war. We have a caller on the line. Caller, welcome. Yes, caller, welcome.
Good afternoon, Mr. Pierre.
Yes, welcome.
You hearing me clearly?
Yes, very clear.
Yeah, good afternoon to you listeners and the viewing audience. Mr. Pierre, the Grenada Constitution is made up of 9 chapters, Mr. Pierre. And today, 2 chapters are going to come into place. Chapter 3, which comprises of section 23 to 56, and deal with the establishment and composition of Parliament. Chapter 4 comprises of section 57 to 74 and deal with the establishment and functioning of the executive. For instance, last Friday, the appointment of the Prime Minister. Today, you're going to have the allocation of portfolios to different ministers. The appointment of the opposition leader, Mr. Pierre, today. And the functioning of the Attorney General and the DPP. I say all that to say that I hope that the people making the decision and putting the people in the right portfolio will do the right thing, Mr. Pierre. And I heard in your earlier in the program you was mentioning about PS, which is permanent secretaries. Mr. Pierre, I would like to know your views on the last administration. There have been 3 permanent secretaries, for instance, in the Ministry of Legal Affairs, Carrico, and Diplomatic Affairs. You had Ms. Rolda Formina, Javan Williams, Alva Brown. All these people was under one ministry. Also, if you look at education, there was also different permanent secretary there, Mr. Pierre. I would like to know your views on that. Should you think the present administration should continue that way or reduce some of the PS in the different ministries, Mr. Pierre?
Yes, caller. Thank you, caller. One of the challenges we have, once you appoint a PS and a PS is appointed, you can't drop them. If you fire them, you have to pay them. That is one of the challenges of the public service. And this is why some government put you to act. Because sometimes you have so much of PS. You have to have 2 and 3 in one ministry. Because you cannot transfer them to another place. One might understand and go willingly if you talk to them. But they have to go to a place of equivalent status. So you cannot send them any and any way. So you might send them 3 of them in agriculture. Say you in charge of fisheries, you in charge of this and you, because each department have a budget. You see, the British left us a public service commission to strangle the Grand Master Eric Gary. And it's stuck with us. And leaders, and remember, the public service is very young people. So you have people in their 20s with a master's, the bachelor's degree and master's. And by the time they're 30, the PS. And another government stuck with them. And if they openly flaunt a political party, the government may not have, that politician may not have much confidence in them. Remember the situation with the permanent secretary? I think that matter went to court and she won. Cabinet sec. No government should appoint a cabinet sec as a permanent worker. They should always let somebody act in that position, because there is no place of equivalent status for a cabinet sec. And you must have problems. So the politicians' hands are tied in some respect. And they have to see how they could demêler. So I'm not surprised you have 3 in one department. You might have 2 in one department. Government might try to reduce the amount of ministries. But a ministry must have a PS. And remember, we can't change that constitution. To amend the constitution, you must have 2/3 of the people in parliament. The NDC now have 9. They have 9. They have to have 2/3. The NNP have 6. And you have to have 2/3 of the people voting in an election. For 40 years, we've been trying to amend the constitution. The furthest we have reached is when Kit had 15 seats. But there was no buying in the opposition. The opposition did not agree. They did not want to amend the constitution. The trade union did not want to amend the constitution. The Bar Association did not want to amend the constitution. And the evangelicals did not want to amend the constitution. Not even Maurice Bishop wanted to amend the constitution. When they asked him, he said, Grenadian like the Queen. No wonder why the more extreme arm called Bishop a petty bourgeois. You like the Queen? So we, unless we have buy-in, that's why I was slightly disappointed, but not upset, with the new Prime Minister when he said, I did not initiate the contact. The opposition leader called him to congratulate him and offer to work together. I felt it was unnecessary for him to insert, I did not make the contact. If the opposition didn't call him, he had to make the contact. Because you want a bilateral relation. You want to cooperate with the opposition on certain issues, and one of them is the constitution. Otherwise, he can't touch the constitution. He can't change nothing. Barbados could turn a republic because Barbados do not have to have 2/3 majority in the House or in the people voting. Jamaica could do it. Trinidad could do it. But Grenada and St. Vincent stuck. So for us to have 2/3 in parliament, and if you can have 2/3 in parliament, you don't make sense going. And if you try to be vindictive and go after the NNP leadership, they would not cooperate with you. This is why we have to remind Grenadians, there are some things you cannot get. Both governments have the same macroeconomic policy and the same philosophy. They only differ in style and strategy. And this is why it's so necessary for the NDC to inform the political warriors, the surrogate leaders, and the politicos that the election is over and now they have to stretch out the olive branch so we could work together. And it's difficult for them. I know it is not easy. This is why I'm saying this thing. Because if you stay in opposition too long, sometime a year after you win, you still believe in opposition. If you see a dog pass, you cuss it. The goat run across the road, you say kill it. The cat jump on the counter, you say hang it. Because you've been doing that for 10 years. So unless you have voices asking for change, and in Grenada, we are not known to have mediators. We have no individuals or institutions in Grenada that interfere to settle dispute. The church afraid because the church don't know how to handle politics and the church. So they're afraid. The lawyers in Grenada have never ever settled any dispute. The worst group in our country is the Bar Association. They never involve in any dispute to settle it. Our best legal minds, they hide and play game always. The trade unions have taken their side. So the journalists in Grenada are political journalists. Nothing's wrong with that. All of them have a political color. So independent-minded people, we don't have perfect people, must remind the ruling party soldiers, you have to put down your gun and you have to pick up your olive branch to get a working relationship. You know? And this is important in a country. Our country is small. If you go to Ticolo and you say you form a group and you decide that on target and your family can be in that group fail. Everybody in Ticolo is my family. Who is not my family is my best drinking rum, my rum drinking partner. So you have a good working relationship in a small community. That is one of the challenges Maurice Bishop had. He locked up so much fellas in Tivoli and Montreach that even the soldiers that were from Tivoli and Montreach, they don't want to come home because the society against them. And the first chance they get, they leave the military and they go in Trinidad because they were ashamed to face their family. We are a small country, a small community. And the quicker we understand that, it's better for the whole country. We must be cognizant of the poor people in our country. I've heard some of the Aspersion casts over the last couple of years, and particular in the political campaign, against those who seem to be less fortunate, those who are older. I've seen the attitude of our educators and the unions, where they declare work to rule. I've said before, this is an abomination. It's a cardinal sin. It's the worst action ever taken in the Caribbean against children. Our trade unions sat down and planned the strategy of work to rule against children. The political directorate is not directly affected, except in terms of empathy and compassion. But these are the people who educate us. And they decide to evoke an alien phenomenon as a policy that goes directly against children. They call it work to rule. The police don't have no work to rule. Public officers don't have work to rule. Opposition members don't have work to rule. Church don't have work to rule. but our teachers implement work to rule. And none of them have the gumption or the guts to explain the difference between a work to rule teacher and a traditional teacher. You see, this must not be taken lightly, because 70% of the children that exit school in Grenada cannot meet the minimum requirements. And most of these children fall in the lower socio-economic strata. Most of these children, they fall in the lower socio-economic strata. But if you go to the prison, the majority of inmates in the prison did not have a good secondary school education. And the prison is overpopulated. But the majority of inmates did not have a good secondary school education. The police in the cinema in Grenville, in one of their meetings, said that the predial larceny rate dropped to 3% of the crimes in the country. Significant drop. And then I said in a program, since the police start to do the demographics and the statistics, I would like to know what percentage of the people involved in predial larceny had a good secondary school education. You see, if we want to solve some of the challenges that we have, we must discuss the issue. We cannot be afraid to discuss the issue. Whether it is in our home, whether it is in the community, whether it is in the workplace, whether among our politicians, these things are staring us in the face. It is staring us in the face, and we're trying to avoid it with sideshows. Well, the election is over, so we could go back to these realities. There is a direct relationship between not getting a proper education and having the need to have a second chance. Not getting a proper education and getting involved in predial larceny. Not getting a proper education and ending up in prison. These facts are there. I always say I express my opinion, but I'm willing to change my opinion if I have new information. So it might be good for us to provoke discussions on these issues. We could be a think tank. You need people to discuss issues and come up with answers, because the ultimate objective is the continued development of our country. That is the aim and that is the objective. I know some people might have had a challenge with the telephone. This one saying that's where political ideology and position come to play. For instance, NNP political ideology is conservatism and political position is center-right, whereas NDC political ideology is center-left. So there are differences in policies and programs. Well, I have been in Tong long, and I've heard these center-right and conservatism, but to be very frank, both of the political parties are generally the same thing. You see the ease with which members from the NDC ends up in the NNP and playing very significant role. Members of the NNP end up in the NDC, end up in the NNP, and they play very significant role. And it seems to mesh in very effectively. But having spoken to a number of these guys, their main challenge was the attitude to the people in the lower socioeconomic strata. That was the main challenge. So I don't see no fundamental difference. I see a mentality and an attitude. And that needs to change. Or we must have discussion on it. Our attitude and our mentality. And it's widespread throughout the Caribbean. We speak about Grenada a lot, but it's widespread throughout the Caribbean. And there is no justification for that. Because our political directorates over the years have done a very good job in providing the basic infrastructure for Grenada. Like freedom of the press, like electricity, telephone, water, internet, relatively good roads, and the independency in proprietorship. And having every child having an equal chance. So I think our real challenge is attitude. And we're back with you again next week for another program of On Target, when you have an opportunity to punch.